Should I start presenting?
You can start the presenting. Yeah, I'll just give a brief introduction, and then we can go from there. I'm on Nisha's screen. I'm going to unpin Nisha's screen.
Cool.
And we are on Nisha's screen, and yep, we should be going and ready live.
Is there art lessons on this one?
Art lessons? No, I haven't got an art teacher yet, baby. But don't worry, I'll find more of my friends to help out and do some art if you want to do art as well.
Yeah.
See, that's why I'm really running the streaming school, bro. It's for me. It's for me when the lockdown's over. Hello, welcome back to the streaming school. It's great to have everyone back. I'm really, really pleased today to take you through our fourth session, third lesson-ish of the day. And the next one we have coming up after this is science. But right now we are blessed to have the wonderful Michael Scott with us. A very good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning, everybody. Morning.
Thank you very much for coming back again.
Not a problem.
How are you finding your time in lockdown now?
Yeah, so I told myself this is perfect time to get better in shape and look after myself a bit more. So I went for a run this morning and smashed my phone. So yeah, that's exercise for you.
But one of the things that you're going to be doing more and more of in your garden in local deserted spaces as well, Michael, is doing more of your science experiments on the YouTube channel you have.
Exactly. Ultimate Learning. We're going to be releasing a video later on today as well. So yeah, take a look, subscribe, leave some comments, let me know what experiments you want to see.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael. Okay, well, you tell us when you want to head over to your presentation screen, and the rest will be with you, my friend.
Yeah, we'll start now. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Right, the screen's all yours.
Okay, guys. So last time that we were together, and we were looking at some biology, we was looking at the structure of different cells. We were looking at animal cells, and we were also looking at plant cells. Now, what I want to focus on in this out of cells, because there are three ways that substances can move in and out of cells, and I plan to go through those three with you this morning. We've also set a link that involves a video where you can watch a video and learn a little bit more in detail, because 20 minutes may not be enough time to go into all the detail, but we've got a link in a video where you can watch some more information and also apply it to some questions. So let's get started with our first movement of substances. And this movement is called diffusion. Now, the term diffusion basically means when particles will move from a high concentration and they end up moving to a low concentration. Now, for those of you that may not know what that term concentration means, I'm just going to show you a quick particle diagram at this side. So here we've got a hallway, let's say, and in this hallway we've got some particles at one end, like this, and at the other end of the hallway we don't have any particles. So we would describe this end of the hallway here as being a high concentration. And the reason that we would say this is a high concentration is because there are lots of particles at this end. Whereas at this end of the hallway, we would say this has a low concentration, because there are not many particles at this end. Now, according to diffusion, what will happen is particles will move from where there is a high concentration to where there is a low concentration. So eventually what will happen, we have this equal kind of spacing out of the particles. So it will happen until the particles are equally spread out. Now, you will need to know exactly where diffusion takes place. And what we want to do is just take a look at a plant and also where it happens for humans. So I'm just going to leave this section over here where we can do a bit of sketches. So, and let's change the color. So the first place that we observe diffusion taking place, and you get to see my art skills now. The first place that we get to see diffusion taking place is a leaf. Okay, leaves have these very small openings, or these very small holes in their surface. I'm just going to draw a few of them here. Now, the holes in a leaf's surface, like right there, is called a stomata. Now, as we said before, diffusion is where particles move from a high to a low concentration. So what happens in the leaf through the stomata is that oxygen diffuses out of the leaf. Oxygen is a product of photosynthesis, and carbon dioxide actually diffuses into the leaf. So there's a high concentration of oxygen inside of the leaf because of photosynthesis, and that oxygen moves from a high concentration to a lower concentration, which is outside the leaf. Likewise for carbon dioxide, there's a high concentration of carbon dioxide outside the leaf, and it moves by diffusion into the leaf through the stomata. You could be asked to describe diffusion in a plant, and that would be a perfect example to use. You could also be asked, and I'll just change the color again, you could also be asked how diffusion works in humans. And let's just have a look at the two places where diffusion takes place in humans. So humans, we have lungs. Humans have lungs, and our lungs are made up of these really small air sacs. They look like grapes. But these are called alveoli. Commonly just referred to as air sacs. Now, what happens in the alveoli, again, is that oxygen diffuses out of our alveoli and goes into the blood. And carbon dioxide that's in our blood moves by diffusion into the alveoli. But we also see diffusion taking place in the small intestine. I'm just going to draw a very small section of a small intestine. And you'll notice that the small intestine have these little finger-like structures. These finger-like structures are called villi. And at the villi, we tend to see the diffusion of substances, again, from the villi into the blood. Sorry, that's a random line there. Let's make that small. So yeah, sorry, as I was saying before, we typically see things like glucose being moved by diffusion from the small intestine into the blood. And obviously we need that glucose for respiration. So they're just two examples of diffusion inside of the human body. Remember, you should know the one that takes place in plants, in the lungs, and in the small intestine. And maybe as some homework, you could research how diffusion can be affected. For example, how things like surface area, temperature, and concentration can affect the rate of diffusion. So what we're going to do, we're going to go on to our second method of how substances move in and out of cells. And this second method is called active transport. Now, active transport is the opposite of diffusion. And what I mean by it being the opposite is that in active transport, particles move from a low concentration to a high concentration. In fact, particles are actually going against a concentration gradient. Now, because the particles are going against the concentration gradient, active transport requires lots of energy. In order for those particles to go against the concentration gradient, they're going to need some energy to do this. So typically, you tend to find cells that do active transport, they will contain lots and lots of mitochondria. Because if you remember from last week's lesson, mitochondria is where respiration occurs, and respiration is what releases energy. Now, once again, you should know where active transport takes place. And this one's really going to test my artistic skills now, so don't judge me until it's over. Hopefully, I'm happy with that. Hopefully, you can make out that this is the stem of a plant, and here we have the roots. Now, if I was just to draw, so you're also getting an art lesson with me as well now, not just science. There you go. If I was to draw some grass, and typically, guys, obviously plants, they need to absorb mineral ions. They need these mineral ions and nitrates typically, because the nitrates help them to grow. They can build proteins from these nitrates. But typically, we find a very low concentration of these nitrates in the soil. Whereas in the root, there are quite a lot of these nitrate ions. And you can see, look, that we're representing this high concentration of nitrate ions. Now remember, the plant wants to absorb as much of these nitrates as possible, because the plant needs those nitrates, as I've said, to build protein. So when we're moving these nitrates from a low concentration in the soil to a high concentration in the root, we have to use active transport. Because remember, active transport is when we go from a low concentration to a high concentration. We also see active transport taking place in humans as well. I'm not going to draw this one as detailed, but again, we see active transport taking place in the small intestine. We see it taking place in the small intestine because at times there can be a low concentration of glucose or sugar. There can be a low concentration of glucose or sugar in the small intestine. But remember, our cells need that glucose for respiration. So the glucose moves from the small intestine into our blood, where it's at quite a high concentration. It moves by active transport. And remember, the cells in the small intestine and the cells in the root, they will need lots and lots of mitochondria, because in order for active transport to take place, you need energy to move these particles against this concentration gradient. Okay, our final one. I'm just going to clear this board again. Our final movement is something called osmosis. Osmosis is the video link that I've set for you guys to take a look at. And osmosis, we only use the word osmosis when we're talking about water. Okay, so let's try and put osmosis into a definition. Osmosis is basically the movement of water from a high concentration to a low concentration of water. But there's one thing that you have to remember here, is that this movement of water from a high concentration to a low concentration has to take place across a semi-permeable membrane. Now, I know most people are probably thinking, what the heck is a semi-permeable membrane? Well, if you try and imagine a football net, you know, the net at the goalpost, the net of a football goalpost is semi-permeable. That basically means it has these really small holes in the net where if things are small enough, they can fit through those holes. So semi-permeable just means it allows things to pass through if it's small enough. So what we typically observe with osmosis is a cell membrane like this could be semi-permeable. Okay? And within the cell or outside of the cell, we have these really small molecules like this, which would typically be water. Okay, and you can see here that we've got this high concentration of water because there's quite a lot of particles. And on the other side of the cell here, we've just got a few. All right, there's not many. And just to show you how osmosis works, there may be, you know, some larger molecules like this, like sugar, some pretty large molecules like that. And these large molecules, hopefully you can tell, these are way too big to fit through those gaps. It won't work. These large molecules are too large. Whereas the small molecules, like water, these are small enough to pass through. Now remember, the water moves from a high concentration to a low concentration. So the water molecules will be kind of moving in this direction. Again, they want to reach a position where the amount of water is equal on both sides. Again, just an example of osmosis. My diagram's not going to be as good this time. I'm rushing. My time is almost up.
Take your time, Mike. No rush from us, buddy.
Say that again.
Take your time, buddy. No rush from us.
Oh, okay. Well, again, we see osmosis taking place in the roots of plants. Okay. Again, the soil that the roots are placed in will have lots of water in the soil, and that water needs to move into the roots by osmosis, from a high concentration in the soil to a low concentration in the roots. And yeah, that's it, guys. So take a look at the task, take a look at the video that you're going to be given. Have a look at the video, and hopefully you should be able to answer the questions.
Thank you so much, Mike. Really, really, really appreciate it, buddy.
No problem.
Amira's here with a whole page of notes. So, I mean, what age would you say this was pitched at, or is this just general knowledge and it's up to the kind of the child or the parent to be encouraged to move in with that?
Well, say that again, sir.
Sorry for it being unclear. What age are you picked? Obviously, this is all the stuff that comes up in the GCSE, but from your experience, and obviously because so many parents who have children other ages than just GCSE age are going to be tapping in, what kind of areas do you think this can cover, or what age group do you think people will be able to tap in from?
Well, yeah, just like you said, this is, I'm just going through some of the GCSE topics, but I always like to pride myself that if I can aim to teach a 10-year-old, then anyone can understand it.
And it's all still got that exam relevance all the way through.
Exactly. So everything, typically what would happen, the students would have to know about osmosis, diffusion, and active transport. And what they would have to do is to apply their knowledge of osmosis, diffusion, and active transport. They'd have to kind of like apply it to a scenario.
With you. Completely with you.
So for example, you know, let me just, oops, sorry.
Do you want me to pop onto your screen?
Let me just show you guys, you know, what I mean by that. You know, a typical question on this kind of topic, you know, you'd be given, I love drawing the roots of a plant, as you can tell. You would typically be given something like this in your GCSEs, like that, and the question would say, you know, explain how osmosis and active, explain how osmosis and active transport occur in the root, for example. And this would typically be like a 6-mark question, and you've got to apply what you know about osmosis and active transport to the roots of a plant. So
that's what you were drawing every time, the root?
What's that, sorry?
So you were drawing roots every time?
What did you think it was, a dodgy hand?
Do you remember there was a book when you were younger called Roald Dahl, The Witches?
The witch, it looks like the witch's hand.
It looks like the witch's hand. I was just like, how's this? Where's I thought witches were magic. I thought they weren't real. How's this in a science lesson?
No, look, for everyone out there, these are roots. I mean, granted, I did get a D in my graphics at school, so that, yeah.
I apologize. Sorry for interrupting.
I'm not the best drawer, but yeah, this you would typically be given, you know, you'll be given a scenario, and then you've got to like apply what you know about osmosis, diffusion, and active transport to that scenario.
Right. So in giving people the basics, where you're putting them in a position where they will then just be able to apply the knowledge, and that's what gets you the GCSE level, not just knowing the stuff.
Well, if we was just to quickly run, so, you know, you could be asked for the definitions. Okay, so for each movement of molecules, I gave you the definition. The definition is worth 2 marks if it's diffusion and 3 marks if it's active transport or osmosis. You would typically then build on this in an exam, and you may be given, some data. It could be a table, it could be a graph, but you'll be given some sort of data for any one of those scenarios. And what you would have to do is interpret that data based on what you know about osmosis and diffusion and active transport, and interpret that data to, again, answer those type of questions. And then your extended writing question is typically something like that.
Okay.
Where they want you to kind of tie together 2 different movements and, kind of like connect it all to one scenario.
With you. Makes a lot of sense, Mike. So if we start to say to people that some of this can be accessed from the ages of 12, 13, you don't see.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, students will be covering diffusion in year 7. They don't really tend to cover osmosis or active transport until key stage 4. So just depending on the school, key stage 4 nowadays can be year 9.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Michael. Sorry to keep you for a little longer.
No, not a problem.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll hand over to you, Nish.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
God bless, Michael. Have a great day.
Bye.
All right, cool. Hoping you can see my screen.
Yeah.
This is the optional science task for parents and students as well. What would happen to a piece of potato placed in pure water and a concentrated sugar solution? Hopefully that's clear enough to everyone.
Sounds like a try. This is one you try at home, Nish.
Yeah. I'd have to have a proper think about it if I was doing it myself. You can find all of these videos on Facebook and YouTube and on Twitch as well. And I will leave all the links to resources and these questions on YouTube descriptions and in the Facebook comments. Up next, you do have another lesson. It's Spanish.
Well, yeah, with the wonderful Miss Alex.
Yeah.
Well, so I'll see you again in 10 minutes, Nish.
Yeah, see you soon.